start with your name and where you're from.
Ready?
Yeah, just talk to me.
My name is Ed Falk. I live in Newport, New York, right next to the West Canada School. And I am not a World War II veteran. I was too young for that. I was a high school kid in the war. But I was in the Korean War. Infantry trained, went overseas in Japan. I got transferred out of the infantry, put in a signal corps and sent to Okinawa. I spent a year on Okinawa just doing telephone work and like that. So I just haven't understood that I was not a World War II veteran. Being on Okinawa, I think, shocked me into seeing so much that was left over from World War II, which Okinawa was taken in the spring of 1945. And I was there in July of '51, and everything was still on the beaches. The bombed out landing barges and all the debris and everything like that was still there. And I think it really impressed me more than us kids back in the States had realized. And that was just one island of so many places that all this had gone on. That's what really got my interest in World War II.
Well, you said a teenager when the war started. When you were
Well, actually, 45, I would have been 15 when the war ended. Yeah, so a teenager, yeah.
Okay, well, tell us about when you first heard about Pearl Harbor and what happened with you at that time. You were a kid.
Yeah, as a kid, everybody, was just oblivious to anything going on, and all of a sudden it was a Sunday. Seems to me it was a cold day with no snow when the word came that Pearl Harbor. And back then, people didn't really know much what was Pearl Harbor, or maybe even Hawaii was so distant and like that. And of course, nobody knew what was going on. There was a lot of things where you knew there was unrest in Europe and like that and all, but it really was a shocker. And that, of course, the fear of nobody knew what was going to happen, and everybody, was such a infamous thing, like President Roosevelt said, that it really did get the people united to end this, and it took till 1945 to do it.
Well, tell us some more about what it was like during that time period, once the president declared war. What did you notice as a child?
Probably mostly the draft started, everything where people were starting to get drafted or enlisting, so a lot of people enlisted and all like that. One of my older brothers, he went in cadets to learn to fly, and he was into the war itself that way. As a kid, like myself, even the Scouts were active back then. The Boy Scouts, I was kind of senior patrol leader. And it's a thing I had written down that back then there weren't plastic bags for blood, and of course blood drives became ever so necessary. That I helped out, the Boy Scouts helped out, and can you believe back then they used rubber tubing, plastic tubing wasn't invented yet, in glass bottles to collect blood. We as Scouts washed out the tubing so that it could be sterilized to be used another time for blood. And the glass bottles were probably just a pint size, I guess. And they had like a metal band that would hold them on the racks and like that. Every once in a while, one of those would get dropped and break, and it was a precious pint of blood and a horrible mess too, It was like that, the blood drives. But everybody did seem to really pull together, and not a lot of discord and belly aching about everything. That the war effort was the utmost. And the Scouts also, like paper drives, that we, helped with that. And another thing I never forget, right on the main street in Park Ave in Herkimer was like a vacant lot at the time. And they put a great big fence up, chicken wire, and aluminum. Everybody's aluminum. Throw it over the fence and fill this right up on the corner of Main Street and Park Ave, the mountain of aluminum. And then somebody take it away, and it was all reprocessed for the war effort. You can't remember things like that.
A lot of rationing going on.
Yeah, rationing was everything. Sugar was almost impossible to come by, and probably back then people even did more baking and like that. So it was maybe even more than the individuals were affected by that rationing. My dad was the meat department of a local Victory store, and they had red stamps for meat, ration stamps, and I think the groceries were blue stamps, as I recall. And he had to take from the people their stamps and put them in a book. We would glue them into this book that he had to turn into books of red stamps to get his next supply of meat even. And this went on all through the war. It seemed to happen soon it didn't take a long time for it to all happen. Of course, cars, there wasn't such a thing as a 1943 automobile. Everything was military. I guess there were a few 1942 cars that were still considered, 42 cars. Gasoline, back then they had A, B, and C stamps. Us regular people had an A stamp, which was, I don't remember what, it was 5 gallons a week. If someone worked in a defense factory, they maybe had a B stamp that of course allowed them enough gas, carpooling to get to work, things like that. C, maybe farmers or industry sort of thing had a C that gave them more gasoline. Another thing that you don't think, I can't imagine that today if they tried to ration gasoline. Yeah, and can't think of anything else along that ration line.
You noticed a camaraderie about this rather than any dissension, any conflict.
Yeah, pretty much so, yeah. There would be some people complain and all like that, and it was tough on my dad, I know, because he had regular customers for years, and all of a sudden he was denied giving them meat they were willing to pay for because, if they didn't have stamps and all, it was not easy. It's one item of it, yeah.
What about, let's see, some other things you put on here. We're talking about war bonds.
War bonds.
Kids wouldn't know what war bonds are.
Probably not, really. For 1875, you could buy a $25 war bond that matured in 10 years. That's what they set up as a enticement for people. And of course, kids didn't have all that kind of money, but they had stamps, of which I do have I think it's a book of stamps there that'll show you that you could buy, for 25 cents a stamp. When you filled the book, you would have had 1875's worth of stamps in there, and they would write you out a regular bond for it. And they had bond drives, tried to get people to, buy more bonds and all like that, because they needed money for everything military-wise to build up our armament. And I don't remember if the Scouts had too much with the war bonds or anything like that, but I think through the schools they even tried to have that where little maybe competitions to see if classes could get more stamps or bonds and stuff like that. Yeah.
So if you look back on it, did you feel a sense of a graveness about the situation, a direness, or did you feel more almost like it was I don't want to say a game, but if they had little competitions in school and things, was it evident to you how dire the situation was? Or
I don't think so. No, as kids, I think a lot was kept from us, how serious it was. And, nothing really was happening right in Herkimer. That's where I grew up. This is all, my memories are Herkimer. And, but everybody had older brothers and whatnot that had gone into the service, and the town was emptied right out practically of the eligible people. And as the war went on, they were drafting older people, married men and everything that, there were a lot of hardships, a lot of things like that with things happening, like bad things, and of course. And we were not oblivious to it because like the Evening Telegram paper, I remember through those years, there was hardly a day that there wasn't a picture of some GI killed or wounded. Almost every day there was somebody hurt because, geez, the boys were scattered, from the valley. They were all over the world in those years. And, you knew somebody or you didn't know them and like that, and everybody.
What do you remember about when families would find out they had lost somebody in the war? There must have been a lot of children who were dealing with that. What do you remember about that? Anything?
Yes. The one thing I do remember, one of the boys, this was actually, I must have been probably in 8th grade in St. Francis School, and this boy lost his father, and they sent him around each classroom with a purple heart, that his mother had received, to show the badge and all. That's all she had, was, and the poor kid, he was the only child, I believe, and, he just was killed, and I remember that. It was very sad, and it made you think that he's never going to have a father again back, for all the years. I don't think I should mention his name, probably.
Now, you said that your brother was in the war.
Yeah, one of my brothers, he was in the college. He had started college and quit and enlisted. And, of course, my family hated to see him do that, but everybody was, and he wanted to get it. He loved to fly. He was into flying. And he became a cadet, they called him, which was a training to become a flyer, like that. And he did got his wings, and he served as a co-pilot on a B-17, which is a bomber plane. He was based out of England. I think it was probably 44 when he got over there, by the time he had been trained and all like that. And I think he had 17 missions, of which he survived, all right. And actually he finished a military career, come out a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. But that was the Army Air Corps at that time when he went in. There was no Air Force. Did you ever hear that? There wasn't an Air Force in the World War II. It was the Army Air Corps. And it was just starting out that airplanes were going to be the thing. So, and another thing I think he had on there too, that we didn't think so much of it, and not too much was said, but he was brought back from England when Germany surrendered in the spring of 45, because Japan still was going to be the most horrible push, and everybody knew it. He was brought back to the United States, and I think he went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to learn to fly B-29s, which is bigger than the B-17, for the invasion of Japan. Now here he'd been lucky enough to survive that, him and millions of other guys, to come back to learn how to fly a bigger one, of which Lord knew it was going to be like if they had to do Japan that way. So naturally, I don't have too many feelings about dropping the A-bomb. It was a horrible thing, but it sure did end the war right then and there.
How did people react that you remember? How did you react when that happened?
The atomic bomb? Well, again, I don't think anybody ever believed they had anything that big to take out a whole city and all like that. And, it just was unbelievable. To back up a bit, though, another thing back with memories back in, before I forget it, my dad, which I have his shoulder patch as a civil defense, he was I suppose they asked him and he accepted to be a warden. They had wardens in the towns, and he had so many blocks around Henry Street that he was responsible for. He had to know who lived in every house, so if something happened, who was missing, or where are they, And he had a record of all the people that lived in the blocks he was responsible for. And he had that shoulder patch, and I remember he had a white steel helmet. And I imagine they gave him a flashlight too. And when they would have air raid warnings, of which we were supposed to cover the windows and all like that, and he would have to go out and make sure people had the windows covered or their lights turned off and things like that, which is another thing I forgot to mention before. Yeah, and
Now you mentioned the air raids. The schools had to be especially trained for that as well.
well, it seems like we did have some air raid things like that, but not too much was done. I don't know if we maybe went to an inside wall or things like that. I don't really remember too much about Herkimer doing that. My wife remembers that though in West Canada. As a matter of fact, that'll be another thing I'll show you, that they actually had like dog tags for the kids with their name on it that they were supposed to wear if something happened to identify them. And she said they used to like put them they'd go under the desks and all like that and practice air raids, things like that. Yeah. Huh.
And probably it just became more rote than scary. Maybe it didn't even scare the kids.
Really, I think so. It's more, something different to do, Yeah.
Now you have a story about you were getting interested in World War II. Why don't you tell us about how you got so interested in collecting things from World War II?
Well, like I think getting on Okinawa and seeing so much in that one island, and you knew there were so many islands in all of Europe that all these things had gone on, and the amount of debris and waste of everything like that had happened in those few years. I think that's what really got me more interested into that. And I think just my military time, I had an interest in it. My clothes that I had, uniforms, well, I worked for a phone company and they made good work clothes, so actually I wore them out like that, used them myself. But and as different people had things that I would sidetrack them and had an interest in it. VFW magazine, the Legion magazine, always had articles about World War II and things that were very interesting to me to read and all. It's crazy, different things that you might not everybody would think about.
One of the things that we wanted to do was to show how even people from small town, all small town USA, small town America, really had got together and really saved the world in essence. Can you comment on what you thought of that, what you think of that now?
Well, I think we were all very proud of it, that like to have a brother in the service, and everybody had somebody in the service, it seemed, and that we knew we were doing the right thing. And there was a lot of spirit that I think people felt good about doing it, but it was a lot of heartaches there, things that happened, yes.
Now you'd see what kind of ways did you get this information about what was going on during the war?
Actually, movies with the newsreels is about all we got other than the newspapers of what was happening. If you'd go to a movie, the newsreel would go to a part of the war that was happening at that time, and Lull, do you ever hear that name? Would maybe narrate where the troops were at that time and things like that. And that's how we kind of kept up with it. The newspapers, of course, reported all like that. I remember my uncle, my father was a widower, and I had an uncle that come down and kind of took care of us kids, and he had a map, actually a European war, on a wall to kind of follow the progress where the guys were and stuff, you could see that and all. And of course, he was very concerned for my brother Jack, who was over there in the B-17. Yeah.
It was an amazing time.
It was very different, Mm-hmm. And I think, like so many of us didn't have all that much like we have today, that it wasn't such a problem. Half of us didn't have cars anyway, so you didn't have gas, so what? Who had the car to use it in anyway? Things like that.
So what did you do? How did you get from place to place?
Well, we usually found somebody that did have, one of the group had a car, borrow my uncle's car or something once in a while, things like that. My dad, he would 1931 Dodge at the time. And he did have it running, on the road some of the time, and we were just learning to drive. My older brother could drive and like that, so we got around.
Walk, ride bikes?
Mostly, yeah. Yeah.
Times were so different.
Yes, they were.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite story about that time period when you were a kid and the war was going on? Do you have some story, any favorite stories about that?
Well, probably the most serious one, the only one is about that footlocker.
Hear about the footlocker.
Yeah. Are you ready for that?
Okay, I am.
I would probably just soon read it. I wrote it down there.
You wrote it down?
The yellow pad below there.
This is my yellow pad.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's over.
You have it? Oh, I see. Okay, sit down. I can make it. Oh,
I'm sorry. I thought that was it.
Are you sure you have to read it? Do you think you could tell it to me without reading it?
Without reading it? Well, I probably can.
I think you can. I bet you can. Why don't you try? Try to tell me without reading it.
Okay.
If you need to
In
pause.
Herkimer, New York, there was a Mr. Watson, a widower, raising his two sons. And World War II come along. Both his sons were taken into the service. I'm sure that James enlisted and Bernard might have been drafted. He had a few medical problems, and I don't know how he went in if he enlisted. I doubt that they would have taken him enlisted. He probably was drafted. Bernard was killed in the invasion of Sicily. Within a year, I figure it's probably within a year, his brother James, a fighter bomber pilot, the owner of that footlocker, was lost on a mission over Germany. His body never recovered. Mr. Watson lost everything he had. He's a widower, all alone, his only two kids, and they're gone, probably in about a year's time. My brother Frank remembers better than I do. Mr. Watson bought meat from my father. The Crossroads was a victory store, right? He says, send your boys up. I got to clean out their closets. Dad comes home, tells us, go up to Mr. Watson's house. Frank and I went up to Mr. Watson's house. He takes us upstairs, shows us his boys' clothes closet, says, take anything you can use. They're not coming back. He left this one downstairs, I'm sure, in the most profound sorrow anyone could imagine. I don't know what Frank and I took that fit or whatever. I'm sure we took some clothes. I haven't any idea, but that cracks up my brother Frank to even think about that yet today, too. After the war, Herkimer had numerous victory parades. You ever hear it? Like celebrating the victory. And they're on the Gold Star Mother's float. You know what a Gold Star Mother is? A mother who has lost a son killed in the war. And they're on the Gold Star Mother's float would be Mr. Watson. Nobody deserved to be there more than he did, raising these kids alone. I obtained that footlocker afterward, and although it's in our attic, every time I look at it, I can't help but reflect on the unbelievable amount of sorrow, suffering, and loss and waste that went on throughout the world during World War II. That's my story.
How brave of Mr. Watson to be able to...
He was a terrific... He was such a nice man, pleasant to visit with. He was the janitor, like at the high school, right? So all the kids knew him. And he's just such a nice, sing-songy voice, upbeat man, and how could he be? But he sure had an awful time of it.
Cleaning out after those boys must have been very difficult.
Had to be. Yeah.
Had to be terrible.
Yeah.
So did Mr. Watson give you the?
Well, if we might as well go into that too. No, he didn't give it to me. He, after, I don't know when, but years after the war, he married a second time to a old-maid school teacher, Ermitude Moore. Miss Moore was a teacher at Herkimer also. And he, the janitor, probably knew her for years and like that. And they got married. He passed away first, and she was left at his house yet and all. And then when she passed away, they had no children. Some of her, I think, nephews come in from Buffalo or someplace to have a house sale. By that time, our daughter was going to Syracuse to set up an apartment, got a job, and go to the house sale and get everything that she might need. Might be something she could use, towels, anything like that. My wife Mill and I went up with Joni to Mr. Watson's house, and they go in, and these guys are just waiting to get the house emptied out, to sell it and get out of there and get home, because they didn't know Mr. Watson or anything about it. This footlocker standing there in a house sale for $10. I saw it, and I couldn't believe the guy would be so callous to put it in a house sale. And I guess I probably got maybe a little strong talking to him. He says, geez, if you know anything about this, take it. Just didn't know what to do with it. And you can't blame him. He had no connection to Mr. Watson or the boys like that. His wife, or his aunt, was afterward, after the war and all. So naturally I took it home, and I've had it ever since. Now, I don't know what years that would have been, but it was probably in the 60s, maybe. No, it had to be later than that, because if Joni was going to work, we were married in 55, 70-something in the 70s. So I've had it probably since the 70s. And it's a handy place to keep anything memorabilia of the military or World War II. That's about the whole story.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You were talking about the victory parades.
Yeah.
What was the feeling of watching some?
Jubilant. Everybody was upbeat, and we beat them, and the ones that come back, they were real happy to be back, and everybody was glad to have them back and all. Yeah, it was happy times when the war was over. Cars starting to come out again, people able to buy cars and batteries and tires and everything that you could not get. So, again, the spirit was still there, that there were a lot of good active parades even, that bands and the whole bit, and even in Herkimer.
Yeah. Now, there was this time period then between the end of World War II, you remembered how exciting that was, and then you actually going into the service in Korea.
Well, they call it the Forgotten War, and I think everybody was so sick and tired of the war after World War II, when the police action come up that they called it in the Korean War. Nobody except the ones that were concerned, like I was drafted. I didn't dare enlist in the Korean War because I worked with New York Telephone Company, and it was very doubtful if you could get your job back if you enlisted. If you were drafted, they had to give you your job back. So I waited to get drafted, and I'm sure the fact that I'd worked for the phone company for 3 years, knowing telephone work, it probably, maybe saved my life in Japan when they needed a signal guy and pulled me out of a file. Did you ever know how they did that? Everybody had a card. It would be holes across it, or they could punch it out to make it a V, so that if somebody had a specialty, like I suppose there's a spot if anybody had anything like communications or electric, so if they punched that out, so if they're looking for somebody, they'd run a rod through, pick out all the cards, so the few cards that fell out, those people had maybe the specialty they were looking for. Did you ever hear that? It was high tech. I'm sure that's how I fell out with, actually the 13 guys out of 500 on the ship that we went over together. And you know, the 13 of us were taken out of the infantry and put in the signal corps and sent to Okinawa. Because when the 13 of us were left, and a lot of the other guys shipped out to Korea, well, how come we weren't with them? You couldn't understand it. And then among ourselves decided, well, geez, we all had some kind of telephone experience. And then, of course, somebody blew the whistle and called us together, told us what was happening. But that was a Korean War. Now, that wasn't World War II.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
There had to be, like you said, people were kind of sick of hearing about war, and then the Korean War came up. Now, at that time, what did you leave family here to go, or what was your personal situation when you left?
Well, I was single, 21 years old, and 51 when I got drafted, and just living at home. My sister was there, my dad, and just the three of us then. So it was no big deal.
What were communications like with people at home?
Communications?
Yeah, between soldiers and anybody at home.
Well, writing back and forth. Well, my dad wrote to me real regular, you know, every week just about, and I tried to write as often as I could too to him. Aunts and uncles wrote too when they'd write back and forth.
What about censoring?
I don't think there was any censoring in the Korean War time, no. There wasn't that much going on. It was so localized a situation.
I didn't know if they still did it by then. I figured they probably didn't.
Oh,
But in World War II,
oh yeah, yeah. Did you ever hear of V-mail? I got one of those too.
yeah,
Yeah.
the bolts cutting the letters. When you came back from Korea, and you got, and I know this is going past, but this is for your own term as a vet because you came back.
Yeah.
What happened with your life when you got back? How was it? What was it like when you returned?
Actually, maybe a little better. Like, of course, it wasn't. In fact, I was on Okinawa for a year. I should have been there 18 months. The tour was 18 months assignment. But my dad had a heart attack after I was there just a year, just about a year. And I was sent home on emergency leave. I went over on a ship, but I flew home on cargo planes, you know, mail planes and all like that. Just, now you talk about, to get out of Okinawa, the airplanes went from Okinawa to Iwo Jima to Wake Island to Johnson Island to Hawaii to Travis Air Base to get me home. Now they probably maybe wouldn't have had to stop at all those islands, but it was mail plane too, so that it was a regular schedule probably, and you know, change mail, take on mail, let mail off at the different islands, stop to get something to eat or coffee or whatever, and move on. You know, another thing that's interesting too is military officers always went first, and I was only a corporal then when I come back. That's as high a rank as I got. But the emergency leave guys, there was 2 or 3 of us on that flight from Okinawa, and the emergency leave guys went on the plane first when they called the roster each time, then the officers, and then the enlisted men got on. But the emergency leave guys went first, which is kind of different. You know?
Yeah. So you were home to stay then?
Yeah, I come home and things pretty much the same. Before I left, actually I worked out of Little Falls. The telephone company had a crew out of Little Falls. I had to go to Little Falls 8 o'clock till 5, you know, report there. When I come back, they had built a garage in Herkimer and consolidated, and everyone worked out of the Herkimer garage, so it was even handier. And I was in the progression, you know, wage progression, so actually I come back to 2 years of progression, making more money for 2 years worth, you know, and like that, which was good. So things were pretty good, really, like that. And got my same job back. And
So did you have a family after that?
and after that, I was married till 1955. My wife and we married and had 4 kids. Yeah.
So you share some of your wartime stories with them?
Some, yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about what you've gone to speak with students before you said?
Yes, I think the 8th grade students that they seem to have, actually it was an English class, but this one teacher had a real interest in that in West Canada, and we'd go over and talk to the kids. And they seemed very interested in it. My wife and I both, with things, like I said, that we knew of World War II at that time period.
What do you think that that is the most important for children to know about that time period?
I think the togetherness and what you can do without, and everything we got isn't as necessary as we think, all the material things and like that, that there's a lot of real living that can be had with a lot less of the material things that we have to do with, that we've grown to think are so important. And look out for one another and for the United States, too. To not be selfish. Just think of what some of those people did sacrifice and give up in World War II. Yeah.
You could see that. You lived through that.
Yeah.
How about if we bring your trunk up and we can show what's in it?
Okay.
We can kind of.
I don't know what I have got. Like, I didn't dare bring them. I have a pistol, a German enlisted man's pistol, and I have a M1.
That might be good that you didn't bring them.
I didn't bring them down.
Probably it's really.
You get a little nervous with guns on.
I
But
think
if we
so.
had told the safety officer, I'm sure it would have been all right.
Probably.
Yeah.
We just had told them we had them there.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that. If
Okay.
you want to just
You can just kind of point to
describe
it, show it's there, what you found in the trunk.
Well, these are newspapers that I hate to unfold. Should I look this way, or things that happened in it? This one actually is 1946, the newspaper, but I hate to take it out to even read it because it's so fallen apart. This contains all my brother Jack, who was the co-pilot on the B-17, being trained on the B-29s and all. Air Corps symbol, is that all right?
Just keep it
Right there.